Week 17, here we go. Let's talk running back and all the players that you need to know about. We're going to go through every matchup to tell you who should be in, who should be out of your lineups. There are not a lot of must-start, no-doubt running backs left at this point of the season, but there are still a few guys you can count on. Christian McCaffrey, Kyron Williams, Jonathan Taylor, and Rachaad White. Before we get to those matchups, a quick note for that Saturday game with the Cowboys, Dak Prescott, if he gets a yard, you could win. That's right, I'm talking about Underdog Pick'ems. If you are new and you haven't tried Underdog yet, sign up now because you get this free pick. It's a new customer special. Dak Prescott going higher than 0.5 total yards. He does that, you win that pick. Just make one other pick, you can triple your very first entry. If you sign up using promo code ENDGAME, you still get a 100% deposit match up to $100. So check it out now if you haven't yet. But let's start with the Thursday game. It's going to be the Jets and the Browns. Well, Breece Hall, he came through last week big time, but that was against the Washington Commanders, and now it's on the road against Cleveland. Is he ready to let down fantasy owners?
I think he is, but at the same time, I think you still got to start him. I mean, you can't bench him after what he did last week. We know he's going to catch passes. He's going to get the run here. I'm very worried that he's going to bust this week, but I think you still have to put him in your lineup and hope for the best.
This is going to be one of the toughest calls. I'm kind of glad we get this out of the way with early on Thursday. Again, everyone's going to look at what he just did and say, you have to start Breece. You can't sit your studs. Going against the absolute worst defense in the NFL, I think I could say that now, with the Commanders, to one of the best, and it's on the road. So I agree. It's going to be really tough to sit him, but I'm worried that he's not going to come through. Now, on the Cleveland side, I think we can feel a little bit better keeping these guys on the bench. Is there a path for Jerome Ford?
Fall in the end zone, catch some passes. Against the Jets, is that really what you want at your championship week? I'm not starting Jerome Ford.
Nah, hasn't been startable for a little while now. Definitely not in this game. And then Kareem Hunt, any different?
Again, I mean, if you're just praying for a touchdown, sure, but come on, this is your championship. I hope you got better options than Kareem Hunt.
Exactly. At this stage of the season, we can just say pass. Now on Saturday, just one game this week. Lions at the Cowboys should be a good one. Jahmyr Gibbs has been a good one. He's getting better as the season goes on. It's what you want to see from a high-end rookie running back. Is he entering almost no doubt must-start territory?
Yeah, it would be very hard to bench Jahmyr Gibbs right now. I know it's not the greatest matchup. I know they're on the road. I don't care. I got Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm starting him.
Agree. You almost have to start him. Too much upside here. And he's not getting vultured at the goal line. He's scoring touchdowns as much, if not more, than Monty over the last part of the season. I'll tell you what, I'm starting Gibbs if I have him. And I'm also taking his pick'em on Underdog because right now, early in the week, 45.5 rushing yards. I'm definitely going higher than that. You should too. I already mentioned if you're new to Underdog, if you haven't tried it yet, you already get the free pick of Dak Prescott. Combine it with this Gibbs pick. Great chance to win your very first entry. And we got David Montgomery. So he's also been pretty solid, been scoring as well. How do you feel about him against the Cowboys?
I don't feel quite as good about him as I do Gibbs, but I still feel like he's solid this week. He's got touchdown upside. I think he's a solid start.
He's always a solid start, always has a chance to score. Cowboys, a good defense, but against the run, they have been gashed at times. So I think Monty's still solid RB2. Now, what about Tony Pollard? A little harder to read here. At home, but against Detroit's run defense.
I mean, if you're somehow still playing with Tony Pollard, kudos to you. One of the most ridiculous non-touchdowns I've ever seen. Going against a tough Lions run defense. I want to sit Tony Pollard this week, to be honest.
I don't blame you. Lions have been shutting down running backs most of the season. And where has been that real upside we were hoping for from Pollard? I think he's okay as kind of a floor play this week. But again, in your championship week, I'm hoping you don't have to start him. Next up, another huge showdown in the AFC. It's the Dolphins at the Ravens. Raheem Mostert has been huge all season. Just keeps scoring touchdowns. Do you have to keep him in your lineup?
I think for the most part you do. There's just too much touchdown upside here. How do you bench this guy? I think you got to play him.
Yeah, there's sometimes you don't overthink the matchup. On the road against Baltimore sounds terrible. But again, it's Raheem Mostert. He somehow over age 30 running back. He has been leading the league in touchdowns. You kind of just have to keep him locked in. What about Devon Achane here?
No, not starting Achane. What is this, the perceived upside, right? Maybe he has this random George Pickens week or a Gabe Davis week, but you want to find out in your championship? I'm not starting him.
Yeah, I think he's going to be one of those guys who forever lives in the mind of fantasy owners of what he did that one week against Denver and those first couple of games he ever played. Are we going to see that again? I don't know, but I'm not betting on it this week against Baltimore. Sorry, I'm benching him. And then for Baltimore now, really the only guy worth talking about is Gus Edwards. We know Keaton Mitchell done for the year. Does Gus the Bus have any intrigue for you?
He is intrigue as far as like touchdown upside. The Dolphins, not a bad run defense, but we know Gus can score. He's got that touchdown upside. But again, it's championship week. I hope you have better options than Gus, but I think Gus is still at least startable. So I'll put him in that, start him if you need him category.
Yeah, I think he's startable this week, but again, in a PPR league, you're not really getting that ceiling because you don't want to bet on multiple touchdowns. So I guess he's startable if you don't have anybody who you really feel better about. Next up, the Patriots going to take on the Bills in Buffalo. Is this the week we see Ramondre Stevenson return? And if he returns, is this a spot you feel comfortable playing him?
I never feel comfortable playing a guy coming off a multi-week absence like this, especially when Zeke has, been decent. It's not a terrible matchup, but on the road against Buffalo, only if you need him.
Yeah, agree. Because are we going to really just assume he's going to get 20 plus touches? I think they would ease him back into action if he does even play. So this is just really risky here. I would say only if you have to, but I would prefer not to start Ramondre. And then talk about Zeke. Wasn't great, definitely in terms of efficiency this past week, but at least he got in the end zone and he's catching a ton of passes. Is he playable with or without Ramondre?
He's playable without Ramondre. I think if Ramondre plays, I don't really want to play Zeke, but he's catching passes. He's getting the volume. He could score. He could not score, but he could. So, again, I'll put Zeke in the if you need him, you can start him category.
Yeah, only playable if Ramondre is completely out. And it's more just of a floor play here because of the pass catching. So, I'm going to say he's maybe a decent RB3 with some upside. On the other hand, James Cook didn't smash last week against the Chargers. Does he smash against the Patriots?
I don't know. What a letdown. And this is a tough matchup. Patriots so good against the run. But we know he's going to get the volume. He could score. But he can't feel great after last week. Didn't catch a pass. Didn't get a target. Only if you need him this week.
Yeah, it's going to be really tricky with Cook. It's honestly just going to come down to who your other options are. There's several running backs I'm definitely going to feel better about than him, but then there's some, like guys we've talked about, on the Patriots side, that I don't. So he's a playable low-end RB2 in most leagues. Next up, we got the Falcons taking on the Bears. Bijan Robinson, despite not getting a ton of touches, just showed what he can do and why he should be getting more touches. But anyways, are we going to ride or die with Bijan in Week 17?
Yeah, for the most part, yes. It's still frustrating here, seeing these other guys. Cordero Patterson running looks like me when he runs, and that's not a compliment. I run like I'm in pain. Cordero Patterson legit looks like he's in pain out there. But they keep getting touches, so we got to just deal with it. But I still think for the most part, you're starting Bijan Robinson.
I am. Last week talked about the matchup. That Colts run defense is not good. The Bears defense is better, but they have a very specific weakness, which if you see what Bijan did last week, he got just as much production, more for fantasy, as a pass catcher. And that's where he can exploit this Bears defense. They, for some reason, just give up a ton of receiving yards to running backs. I don't care. I have Bijan. I'm starting him. Too much upside. It's a good spot for him. I'm starting him. And then you don't want to do it, but you might have to consider Tyler Algier for the same reasons, but also he's still getting a lot of carries. But could you do it?
I couldn't do it. Look, he ripped off that long touchdown, but, that was against the Colts. This is the Bears. Not getting enough touches for me. I'm not doing it this week.
I'll tell you, he's not the worst pick at running back, but again, it's just maybe against my principles to do this. to support Arthur Smith's agenda, but also I do think we need some more upside. Without a touchdown, Algiers probably not cutting it for you, so you probably shouldn't do it. Now for the Bears, it's Khalil Herbert, the lead back here again. Looked great this past week. Seems like a strong add to your roster, but would you start him?
Yeah, it looked great last week with Foreman out against the Cardinals, but this is the Falcons. The Falcons have been very good on defense. I guess he's got touchdown upside. I mean, it's really going to come down to Deontay Foreman being in or out. Because remember, Foreman was out for personal reasons, not for any kind of injury. So he could certainly be back this week. So I'm going to put Herbert in the start him if you need him only category.
Yeah, I feel like this could be a trap where you're expecting, oh, look, he's going to get 20 carries and he's going to do great. It's a much worse matchup against this defense, but also, like you said, what if Foreman gets some action? But I will tell you, the Bears also might be without Cole Kmet, and then DJ Moore also got banged up, which is part of the reason why Herbert got so much run last week. So this really is going to depend a lot on the injury report by the end of the week here. So I'll say Herbert is kind of just a risky flex option right now. And then Rashawn Johnson did get some carries, but also got some catches as expected. Do you feel like he's at least got a floor here?
I mean, maybe, but it's not a high enough floor for me to feel good about him. I'm not starting him.
Yeah, the problem is there's really not much of a ceiling. So I think Johnson can't be in week 17 in fantasy lineups. If Deontay Foreman returns, is there a path?
No chance. No chance.
No, exactly. It shouldn't even matter. He doesn't really need to be on a roster right now. Titans at the Texans. Let's start Derrick Henry. All right, the last time these two teams played, not long ago, Derrick Henry somehow averaged less than 1 yard per carry. And then last week, he went off. Which Derrick Henry do we get this week?
Yeah, somebody liked Derrick Henry last week, if I recall. But I don't like him as much this week on the road against the Texans. I mean, I guess he's still startable because he's Derrick Henry and he could do Derrick Henry things. But, man, I feel like this is going to be a real letdown here. So I'm going to put him in the only if you need him category.
Well, D'Amico Ryans certainly had a good game plan facing Tennessee last time. It was, look, you stop the run. What are they going to do? What can Tennessee actually do? Not much. So I feel like they're going to go all out to shut him down again. You can never say he's a must bench, but I'd rather look elsewhere if possible. On the other side, Devin Singletary, still the guy. Well, like he didn't do great last week. Does he bounce back this week?
Probably not. I mean, tough matchup again. I'm not starting Devin Singletary this week.
No, I'd prefer not to. I think he could be an option just because he's getting so much volume, but it's not a great spot with this Tennessee run defense. So just kind of a fringe RB3. Raiders taking on the Colts. This would seem to be a smash spot for Raiders running back, but who's it going to be? Josh Jacobs missed again last week. If he comes back, you feel like he's going to just be the workhorse again?
Yeah, assuming he finally starts practicing. I mean, kind of was surprising he didn't play this week. So I do think we're going to see him this week, and I think he will be the workhorse, and I think you're going to need to start him.
Yeah, at this point, Jacobs, you feel like even as good as Zamir White looked last week, if Jacobs plays, you have to play him, especially in this spot. But then this leads to Zamir White. Without Jacobs, he crushed the Chiefs. What if Jacobs plays? Is there a dilemma here?
No, if Jacobs plays, there's no dilemma. But if Jacobs is out, I think Zamir White is a guy you can at least start if you need him.
Agree. I don't think, despite how good Zamir White looked last week, that there's going to be any sort of a timeshare here. So, yeah, if Jacobs plays, you can't play White. If Jacobs doesn't play, I think you almost have to play White. It's the Colts run defense. Next up, the Panthers at the Jaguars. Surprising to say, I think the first guy here has been more productive and might be a stronger start this week, and that's Chuba Hubbard. So Chuba Hubbard has been pretty good. Going against the Jags doesn't look as scary as it used to anymore. Are you starting Chuba Hubbard?
I know the Jags' defense hasn't been as good, but look, they were still very good against the running game last week. Like, Rachaad White did not do a lot on the ground. It was all through the air. Chuba, not nearly the pass catcher of Rachaad White, not nearly as good of an offense. I mean, but he's getting the volume, so I can only put him in the if you need him category this week.
Yeah, it's not going to be as strong of a start he's been the last couple of weeks because of matchup, like you said. But I think he's still a solid RB2. So again, this will be one that depends on who your options are. And then Travis Etienne, what is going on both with him and this whole Jags offense? Is this to the point where you just have to sit him because you can't trust anybody here?
Man, this is going to be a tough call all week too, because if you're even still playing with Travis Etienne somehow, it's the Panthers. They're at home. This is such a good matchup for him. And you got to think, like, with Trevor Lawrence banged up, maybe we're going to see CJ Beathard. Do they lean on Travis Etienne, or do they just say, okay, let's just run the ball and win this ugly game against the Panthers like they should? Because the matchup is so good, I'm going to say Travis Etienne is a good start this week.
If not for the matchup, I might just say just bench him outright. Like you said, Trevor Lawrence, who knows if he will play? Man, the Panthers haven't been as bad against the run lately, but it's still a good enough spot. I think one final time, again, unless you happen to have two other stud running backs ahead of him, you're probably still starting Etienne and hoping for the best. Rams at the Giants. You might say this is why you don't sit a guy like Saquon Barkley. Bounce back big time in Week 16. Still a tough assignment, though, against the Rams here. How do you feel about Saquon?
Yeah, but I mean, he had a tough assignment last week, too. What I like to see was that the Giants actually were like, hey, this guy's the best player in our offense. Let's get him the ball a bunch. We got to hope that happens again. Not the best spot, but I think you still got to start Saquon Barkley.
Right. Even if you don't expect a huge game, it's Saquon. He's a guy I feel better about than, say, Travis Etienne. And look, maybe with Tyrod Taylor back at quarterback, this helps the offense a little bit, a little more consistency. So, yeah, for the most part, I'm starting Saquon. Next up, the Cardinals at the Eagles. James Conner continues to produce, but now a road game against Philly. Is he still somebody that is a solid enough option in championship week?
I think so. I mean, I don't feel great about him this week, but the volume is there. He catches enough passes. I still think he's a solid start.
Right. This is the kind of player I will say that even despite the defense he's facing, you want to go with him because, again, so much opportunity in terms of the market share in that backfield. He catches passes. He gets goal line work. Even in a tough spot, I would still roll with Connor. And then DeAndre Swift, similar, but he gets a smash matchup here against Arizona. I think you'll just have to start Swift.
Yeah, I agree. Finally found the end zone, right? Probably should have had like a 2 or 3 touchdown game in Christmas there, but great matchup at home. You got to start Swift.
New Orleans Saints are going to take on the Tampa Bay Bucks. This is important for both teams, and it's important for your team if you have Alvin Kamara at running back. What a letdown last week. You know, it feels like Kamara each season is either a league winner or one of the biggest busts on your team. What's it going to be this week?
Yeah, you got to be a little worried for Kamara. Are we starting to see him wear down, right? A lot of touches on his body over the years. And now he gets another really tough matchup against Tampa Bay, one of the best run defenses. But still, I mean, are you sitting Alvin Kamara this week? Probably not. I think he's still a solid start.
It would be tough to do, but I can see a path to sitting Kamara because he's kind of almost all or nothing, isn't he? Like he either has a huge game where he's involved or he gets phased out. I'm worried this game is going to turn into sort of a shootout between the quarterbacks, believe it or not. So I'm not going to say you have to sit Kamara, but I think you can. Niners going to take on the Commanders in Washington. Brian Robinson still hasn't appeared since injuring his hamstring a couple weeks ago. If he makes his return, it's against this Niners defense. How would that make you feel?
Not good. I mean, in this offense against this defense, coming off a hamstring injury, I am not starting Brian Robinson.
Yeah, disappointing end to what was a really good season. But yeah, at this point, I don't think you even need to consider him. If he doesn't play again, we could see more Chris Rodriguez, who managed to score a couple of touchdowns last week against the Jets. Could he pull something like that out again?
I mean, maybe, but again, this is your championship week. Is Chris Rodriguez the best you got? I mean, he could score, but he could always just completely bust. I would prefer not to.
Yeah, let's not count on garbage time production here, even though they probably will have a chance for that. I can't do it. The only way I would even consider Rodriguez if he was going against the Commanders defense, which isn't possible. And same goes for Antonio Gibson. I know we could talk ourselves into, well, he'll catch a lot of passes and maybe in the garbage time, but sorry, that's way too risky for me.
Yeah, I'm not talking myself into that. Not starting Antonio Gibson this week.
The Steelers going to take on the Seahawks this week. Najee Harris kind of bounced back last week on the road against Seattle. What do you think he'll do?
I mean, this is a really good matchup. This Seahawks run defense has been horrible the last 2/3 of the season. But it's still Najee Harris. It's still the Steelers. You still probably really need a touchdown. So only if you need them this week because the matchup is good.
I'm going to put him a little higher, maybe like the low-end RB2 range. It seems like with the new offensive play caller, Canada out, it seems like they're going back to Najee as the main guy, a little less Jaylen Warren. This matchup could be good enough for him, but also he's not a guy I feel like I have to start. We know that there's risk, so I think he's a solid, decent RB2. And then Jaylen Warren, do you feel the same about him, worse or better?
I think you got to feel a little worse. I mean, if you're in a PPR league, he can probably get you 10 points, but that's really about it. Is that the upside you're looking for in your championship? I'm not doing it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, is just the upside isn't there. I think it's a little less than with Najee and just not enough compared to these other running backs who you should have on your team. And in Seattle, Kenneth Walker looks like he's still healthy, looking good. This is a better spot for him against the Steelers, but also at home. Is he a guy you feel is a pretty strong option this week?
Yeah, finally gets a good matchup at home. I think you got to feel pretty good about Kenneth Walker this week finally. I think he's a solid start.
Agree. I'm putting him more like the upper end of the RB2 range. He could have a big game. Chargers taking on the Broncos. It's time to talk Austin Ekeler. For the chip, you put Ekeler in your lineup because it's Denver on the other side.
I'm putting Austin Ekeler in with confidence this week. 21 points the last time they played Denver. But what I really liked was we saw, and we're going to talk about him more on the booms, he got 15 carries and 4 targets with Giff Smith, the new head coach. It looks like Giff is like, he's our guy. Against the Broncos, that's enough for me. I'm playing Ekeler.
Makes sense that he should be their guy anyways. Yeah, in this matchup, I know he's been disappointing most of the season, to be honest, especially lately. But I think you got Ekeler. You're going to have to trust him. Now, I know on the other side, the matchup's still pretty good, but I can't put Javonte Williams in my lineup if I have the championship on the line.
No, this is a guy, I mean, if you're desperate, sure, because he's getting the volume, but that's it.
Bengals going to Arrowhead, take on the Chiefs. Let's talk Joe Mixon. Didn't smash last week. Does he bounce back?
I mean, he should. It's a good matchup here. I mean, the worry is like, okay, did we just see the real Jake Browning and now this offense is going to be horrible like we thought it was going to be? Or can Jake Browning bounce back? But I think Mixon in this matchup is still like a solid start.
I will say he's startable, but man, there's some risk here. I know Zamir White just gashed this defense, but I don't know. I'm a little nervous here about Mixon. He's a little on the older side for running backs. He might be wearing down later in the season here. I'd say he's startable, but if you have a guy like Kenneth Walker, instead, I would prefer him. Now for the Chiefs, you'd think you just roll with Isaiah Pacheco, but he left early in Week 16. It's going to be in the concussion protocol, so we're going to have to see what the final word is. If Pacheco is cleared for Week 17, do you play him?
I think you have to. It's another good matchup for him. KC's at home. They need him. This offense seems to need him, so I think if he plays, you start him.
Yeah, I would agree. I really hope he clears because this Bengals run defense can be exposed. Pacheco was looking good until he got hurt. Always has touchdown upside, so let's just hope he plays. And if he doesn't, let's remember, Jerick McKinnon was put on IR. No McKinnon, maybe no Pacheco. Could you roll with CEH?
I mean, I wouldn't love it, but he certainly becomes playable. He's going to get all the touches. He'll catch passes. Like you said, this Bengals run defense can be exploited. I'm going to say, if Pacheco is out, you can play CEH if you need to.
He's not going to be the worst option. I mean, I guess he would almost have to serve as a bell cow in this case because they got nobody else. I really hope your RB depth is good enough that you don't have to play CEH, but if it isn't, I guess he's not the worst. Then in the final game of Week 17, not on Monday, it's going to be late Sunday night game. It's the Packers at the Vikings. Big game for both these teams. Aaron Jones finally looked like himself last week. Does he keep it going?
Probably. I mean, I will say the Vikings, I think, are much better defensively and against the run than a lot of people realize. But like you said, he looked good. He looks healthy. He's got that explosive ability. I think he's a solid start.
Yeah, now last week he did get the Panthers and that terrible run defense. We have to keep that in mind. Now it's on the road against Minnesota. But, man, every one of their receivers is hurt. They're going to have to use him probably more as a receiver. If he's actually healthy, I think he's locked in as a solid RB2. A.J. Dillon did manage at least to vulture a touchdown from Aaron Jones early on. But still, we can't start him this week, can we?
No, he's like right there with Kareem Hunt. You're just praying for a touchdown just so you don't get absolutely killed. Cannot start him.
Ty Chandler had a very similar stat line. He got a touchdown early, and everyone who started Chandler was doing backflips, but he really didn't look good this entire game against Detroit. And now Madison could be a step closer to playing. So what do you do with Ty Chandler?
Yeah, it's a better matchup here for sure at home against this Packers run defense. I think, Madison played but like 9% of the snaps. I still don't think we see a lot of Madison. So I think Ty Chandler in this matchup, if you need him, you can start him.
Agreed. Chandler this week. It's going to be another tough call here. It really comes down to who else do you have. I think Chandler will be okay. I'm putting him more like on the high end of the RB3 range. And then finally, what about Madison? Do you feel like he would make enough of a dent to actually have any fantasy value?
No, way too risky here. Cannot start him.
Agree. He'll be out there playing, but you shouldn't be playing him. Now you know who to start at running back and who to sit. Don't forget to check out wide receiver, quarterback, tight end, everything else you need to do in your fantasy lineup to win and take home that championship. It's all here on this week's playlist.